You can throw away everything or marry me instead," said the billionaire to the woman on the bridge. A small-town bookseller hears that line on a cold night, and everything she knows is suddenly on the table. A mysterious billionaire offers to save her beloved shop with one shocking choice, and the town breathes a hopeful sigh. But the money comes with a hidden clause, a secret past tied to a town that lost everything, and an angry son who thinks she's been sold out. Loyalties split, old wounds surface, and a quiet man with a pile of cash might be trying to fix more than a building. Which would you choose when survival asks you to give up your voice or give your heart? The bell above the door chimed one last time as Claire ushered out her final customer of the day. "Thanks for coming in, Mrs. Henderson. I hope Tommy enjoys the new dinosaur book." She waited until the elderly woman had made it safely to her car before turning the sign from open to closed, her fingers lingering on the wooden frame as if reluctant to end another day. The familiar scent of old books and cinnamon tea wrapped around her like a warm blanket, comforting and constant. Claire moved through the cramped aisles of the book nook, running her fingers along the spines of well-loved novels, each one a friend with stories to tell. Every shelf reached from floor to ceiling, packed tight with adventures and romances, mysteries and memories. Handwritten note cards peeked out here and there, perfect for beach reading, and warning, may cause happy tears. Each written in Claire's neat, looping script, small personal touches that customers often mentioned made the shop feel like home. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon sunlight, streaming through the front windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn wooden floorboards. Claire paused to straighten a crooked row of children's books, smiling at the colourful, well-thumbed covers that had delighted generations of the town's young readers. At the counter, steam still rose from her forgotten afternoon tea, curling into the air like a question mark. The chalkboard nearby announced tomorrow's children's reading hour in swooping letters, decorated with tiny stars and a cheerful cartoon bear holding an open book. Claire picked up the teapot, noting how the spicy, sweet smell always reminded her of Michael. He'd introduced her to cinnamon tea on their first date at that little cafe by the lake that had closed years ago. "You're doing that thing again," Maggie's voice called from behind a towering stack of returns that threatened to topple at any moment. "That dreamy face while you sniff tea, it's like watching someone time travel." Claire smiled as her best friend appeared, armed with a broom and determination in her eyes. Maggie's dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, a pencil stuck behind one ear. "Just thinking. You know me." "About Michael?" Maggie's dark eyes softened with understanding, the teasing tone gentling. She'd known Claire since high school, had stood beside her at the wedding in a periwinkle dress, and had helped pick up the pieces after the accident 3 years ago, bringing casseroles and strength in equal measure. "Always." Claire began counting the day's earnings, muscle memory guiding her hands through the familiar routine of bills and coins. The register was old-fashioned, like everything else in the shop. He would have loved how the shops turned out, especially the mystery corner. He also would have made you get rid of half these books by now." Maggie swept beneath a precarious tower of paperbacks with careful movements. "You're worse than a dragon with its treasure, honey. Every time I turn around, there's another box of books arriving." "It's not hoarding if it's literature," Claire protested, but her laugh held genuine warmth, echoing in the quiet shop. This was an old argument between them, comfortable as a favorite sweater, worn thin in places but still fitting perfectly. While Maggie tackled the dust bunnies hiding in corners and beneath shelves, Claire straightened the stack of returned novels on the counter, checking each one for damage before reshelving. Her hand brushed against the small wooden frame tucked behind the register, her and Michael on their wedding day, both laughing at some forgotten joke, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. In the drawer below, a velvet box held his watch, still set to the time of the accident. Small anchors in a world that sometimes felt too big, too empty, especially in the quiet moments between customers. A white envelope caught her eye, partially hidden under a stack of invoices and order forms. The landlord's notice, another reminder that the building might soon be sold to developers eyeing the prime downtown location. Claire's throat tightened as she quickly slipped it into her purse, away from prying eyes. Maggie didn't need to worry about that. Not yet. There would be time enough for bad news tomorrow. There, Maggie declared triumphantly, propping the broom against the wall and wiping her hands on her jeans. Clean enough for another day of your book-loving customers to mess up again. She gathered her things, pulling on her faded denim jacket and wrapping a colourful scarf around her neck against the evening chill. Want to grab dinner? That new Thai place opened up across from the hardware store. I hear their pad Thai is amazing. Rain check? Claire forced a smile, hoping it reached her eyes. I need to finish up some paperwork and inventory stuff. Boring owner things. After Maggie left, reluctantly, but with a promise to bring Claire lunch tomorrow, the shop fell into that special kind of silence that only comes in places filled with stories. Claire stood at the front window, watching dusk paint the small town in shades of purple and gold. Streetlights blinked on one by one, like stars being placed in the growing darkness. The old iron bridge was visible in the distance, its familiar silhouette a constant through all the years of change, through births and deaths, celebrations and heartbreaks. That's where she needed to be tonight, somewhere quiet to think about what she could keep and what she might have to let go. She reached for her coat hanging on the antique hall tree by the door, decision made. The bridge had always been her thinking spot, even before Michael. She'd gone there after her first heartbreak at 16, after college acceptance letters arrived, and after Michael had proposed. It would be the right place to face what was coming, to find the strength to protect what mattered most. Claire hugged the wooden box close as she walked along Main Street, the worn maple corners pressing into her skin. The evening had grown cooler, and scattered crimson and golden leaves skittered across her path, crunching beneath her boots. Each step toward the iron bridge felt heavy with purpose, the weight of Michael's treasures pressed against her chest like a stone, pulling her forward as surely as the current below pulled toward the sea. A foghorn sounded in the distance, its mournful note echoing across the water, vibrating through the quiet darkness. The autumn wind carried the briny scent of the river, tugging at her hand-knitted scarf and sending ripples across the dark surface below, where moonlight danced in broken patterns. The bridge's metal railings gleamed dully under the yellow glow of street lights, worn smooth by countless hands over the decades, by lovers, dreamers, and the broken-hearted just like her. When she reached the middle of the bridge, Claire set the box on the wide concrete ledge, her fingertips lingering on its polished lid. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing the carefully preserved pieces of her life with Michael, each one a fragment of the happiness that once seemed unbreakable. The wedding photo caught the lamplight. There they were, dancing at their reception, her cream dress swirling around her ankles, her head thrown back in laughter while he gazed at her with pure joy, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that always made her heart skip. Remember that ridiculous toast your brother gave? She whispered to the photo, tracing Michael's face with her fingertip. You were so embarrassed when he told everyone about your high school band phase. Her voice caught in her throat like a trapped butterfly. And last Christmas, when I wanted to go to my sister's, but you insisted on staying home because of work. She touched the stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, letters they'd written during their brief separation when he'd taken that consulting job in Seattle. I was so mad at you. Such a stupid fight. If I'd known it would be our last Christmas together. The watch lay at the bottom of the box, nestled in a handkerchief she'd embroidered as a gift. Its face reflected pinpricks of starlight from above, the silver case scratched from years of wear against shirt cuffs and jacket pockets. Still frozen at 8:43, the exact moment everything changed, when his heart had simply stopped beating while she was making grocery lists in the next room. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs as she gathered the box in her arms once more. The river churned 15 feet below, dark and inviting, its rhythmic lapping against the stone supports whispering promises of peace. Maybe if she let these pieces of him go, scattered them across the water's surface, the ache would finally ease. Maybe she could sleep through the night without reaching across the empty space beside her. She lifted the box higher, fingers loosening their grip, the night air rushing between her palms and the smooth wood. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice was gentle, almost hesitant, without a trace of mockery or judgment, just quiet concern hanging in the space between them. Claire startled, nearly dropping the box for real, her muscles tensing as adrenaline coursed through her. She spun around to face a tall man in an expensive but understated charcoal wool coat, his expression caught between concern and embarrassment at interrupting such a private moment. The collar of his coat was turned up against the wind, and his hands were tucked into his pockets. "What I do with my possessions is none of your business," Claire snapped, clutching the box tighter against her chest as if it could shield her. Her cheeks burned with anger and shame at being caught in such a vulnerable moment, her grief exposed to a stranger's eyes. The man, who looked to be in his early 40s, with neat dark hair going silver at the temples and features that suggested he spent more time in boardrooms than on bridges at night, held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "You're absolutely right. I apologize for intruding. It's just—" He glanced at the box with a gentle understanding that caught her off guard. Sometimes we regret the things we let go of in moments of grief, things we can't get back once they're gone. Claire let out a sharp laugh that sounded brittle even to her own ears. "And what would you know about grief?" "More than I'd like." His voice was quiet, but something in his tone made Claire pause, a hidden current of pain that mirrored her own. He shifted his weight, expensive shoes scuffing against the bridge's weathered boards. "I'm Alex Voss. I'm in town for—" He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Well, by chance, really. "Nothing happens by chance in River's End," Claire said, studying him more carefully now, noting the fine lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself, as if carrying an invisible weight. "Everyone knows that. This town has a way of bringing people exactly where they need to be, whether they realize it or not." A small smile tugged at his mouth, softening his features. "I'm learning that." He gestured to the box with a tentative movement. "May I ask what brought you here tonight? To this particular spot?" Claire surprised herself by answering, words spilling out before she could stop them. "My bookstore, the Book Nook, over on Maple Street. The building's being sold and I can't afford the new lease terms, and it was Michael's dream as much as mine, and I just—" She stopped abruptly, wondering why she was telling a stranger her troubles, unloading her burdens onto a man she'd never seen before tonight. "Ah." Alex nodded, as if something had clicked into place for him, his eyes flickering with recognition. "And these items, in the box?" "Memories. Of my husband." Claire's fingers tightened on the box until her knuckles whitened. "But that's really none of your concern, Mr. Voss." The formality felt like necessary armor, a way to rebuild the wall his unexpected kindness had started to breach. "Please call me Alex." He took a step closer, his shoe scraping against the pavement, then seemed to think better of it, recognizing the invisible boundary she'd drawn. Let me drive you home at least. It's getting cold and the forecast mentioned rain." As if on cue, a light mist began to fall, tiny droplets glittering in the streetlights. "No." Claire shook her head firmly, though the chill was seeping through her jacket. "But thank you for the offer." She couldn't explain why she added those last words, only that something about his quiet presence felt steadying, like a handrail in the dark. To her surprise, Alex fell into step beside her as she started walking back toward town. They walked in silence for several blocks, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional distant car. The box of memories now felt like a shield between them, a physical manifestation of all she wasn't ready to share. Just before they reached Main Street, where the hardware store's neon sign buzzed and flickered in the mist, Alex pulled something from his coat pocket. "My card," he said, tucking it carefully into the corner of the box, the cream-colored paper stark against the dark wood. "If you ever want to talk about the bookstore situation, I might have some insights that could help." Claire opened her mouth to refuse, suspicion flaring briefly, but he was already turning away, the broad shoulders of his coat disappearing into the shadows between streetlights. She stood for a moment, watching him go, water droplets clinging to her eyelashes as the mist thickened into a gentle rain. In her apartment above the hardware store, with its creaking floorboards and drafty windows, Claire placed the box on her bedside table, Michael's watch gleaming in the darkness like a tiny lighthouse. She changed into her warmest flannel pajamas and curled under the quilt her grandmother had made, listening to the rain tap against the window pane. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Too many questions swirled in her mind about the stranger on the bridge with his kind eyes and careful words, about the uncertain future of her store with its shelves of stories and memories, about what tomorrow might bring to a life that had seemed so settled just hours ago. Claire's fingers fumbled with the key in the lock, a sleepless night hanging heavy on her shoulders. The familiar bell chimed as she pushed open the door to the book nook, bringing with it the comforting scent of old paper and leather bindings. "Good morning, beautiful books," she whispered, her daily greeting a ritual that helped ground her. She moved through her opening routine, turning on the lights, adjusting the thermostat, straightening the already neat stack of new releases on the display table. Mrs. Peterson, a fourth-grade teacher from Rivers End Elementary, arrived promptly at 9, her reading glasses perched on top of her head. "Morning, Claire. I need some new chapter books for my reluctant readers." Claire's smile came easier than she expected. "I just got in a series about kids who solve mysteries with their dogs. Want to take a look?" While Mrs. Peterson browsed, George Franklin shuffled in for his weekly crossword puzzle books. "The usual George. You know me too well," he chuckled, counting out exact change from a worn leather coin purse. The morning moved steadily. Claire found herself pausing over a returned copy of The Secret Garden, noticing a coffee stain on page 43. She grabbed her notepad, jotting down, "Light water damage, still readable, reduced price 15%. The bell chimed again, and Maggie burst in, her dark curls wind-blown. "So," she announced, dropping her purse behind the counter, "tell me everything about this mysterious man on the bridge." Claire nearly dropped her pen. "How did you— Mrs. Halloway saw you walking back with him last night. Said he was tall, dark, and wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly mortgage." Maggie's eyes sparkled. "Spill." "There's nothing to spill." Claire protested, but her cheeks warmed. "He just happened to be there." "Nobody happens to be on that bridge at night," Maggie pointed out, arranging bookmarks in their display. Before Claire could respond, a shadow fell across the doorway. Alex stood there, holding 2 paper coffee cups, looking simultaneously confident and uncertain, a strange combination that made him seem more human than the night before. "Good morning," he said, stepping inside. "I hope one of you drinks vanilla lattes?" Claire accepted the coffee with murmured thanks, very aware of Maggie's raised eyebrows. Alex wandered the store, pausing to straighten a book here, read a shelf label there. He stopped at the children's corner, where a sign announced, "Reading Hour, Wednesdays at 3 p.m, donations. Welcome." "I noticed yesterday you were recommending the night circus to someone," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet store. "Said it was atmospheric but accessible." Claire blinked, surprised he'd caught that detail during his brief visit. "Yes, to Sarah Mitchell. She likes fantasy but gets overwhelmed by complex world-building." Alex nodded, then approached the counter. "I'd like to make a donation for the reading program." He pulled out a sleek credit card. "Children's literacy is important." The transaction was quick and generous. More than generous. As Alex left, Maggie grabbed the receipt, her eyes widening at the name. "Claire," she whispered, already pulling out her phone. "That was a Voss Holdings corporate card." Her fingers flew across the screen. "Oh my God! Alexander Voss! He's that financier who's been buying up historic properties all over the country and turning them into community spaces. Look!" She thrust her phone at Claire. The screen showed a Forbes article featuring Alex in a tailored suit, looking more polished than he had on the bridge. The headline read, "Voss Holdings, reinventing small-town America one building at a time." Claire's stomach clenched. "He said he was here by chance." "Honey, nothing about that man is here by chance," Maggie said firmly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and questions Claire couldn't answer. When she finally locked up that evening, the mailbox by the door held a single cream-colored envelope. Inside was a cashier's check with enough zeros to make her hands shake. A small note card accompanied it, the message written in neat, precise handwriting. "To preserve what preserves us." Claire sank into her reading chair by the window, the check and note spread on her lap. Relief warred with suspicion in her chest. The money would cover the overdue rent, the upcoming property tax bill, even the repairs the heating system desperately needed. But nothing came without strings, did it? She thought of Michael, who'd always said that pride could be more expensive than poverty. She thought of Alex on the bridge, stopping her from throwing away memories she might regret losing. She thought of his coffee offering this morning, a small kindness that felt both calculated and genuine. The check seemed to grow heavier in her hands. Accept it, and she might be accepting more than money. Refuse it, and she might lose more than just the store. Claire carefully tucked both check and note into the register for the night, her decision still balanced on a knife's edge between gratitude and fear. Tomorrow she would have to choose. But tonight, she just let herself feel the weight of unexpected kindness from a stranger who might not be a stranger for long. Claire lay in bed. Michael's letters spread across the quilt like fallen leaves. The digital clock blinked 3:17 in the morning, its red numbers reflecting off the cashier's check on her nightstand. She'd called the issuing bank's after-hours line twice already, each time receiving confirmation that, yes, the check was legitimate. "What would you do?" she whispered to Michael's familiar handwriting. One letter caught her eye, from their first year of marriage, when they'd been deciding whether to take out a loan for the bookstore. "Sometimes the bravest thing is accepting help," he'd written during a business trip. "Pride makes poor company on cold nights." Unable to sleep, she padded downstairs in her robe. The back room was a testament to community life. Flyers for bake sales, lost cat posters, sign-up sheets for the summer reading program. Under fluorescent lights, she traced the names of children who'd completed their reading challenges, their wobbly signatures a reminder of why the store mattered. By sunrise, Claire had made coffee but no decision. The bell chimed as Maggie arrived, taking one look at Claire's face and saying, You haven't slept. The check is real, Claire said, pulling it from her pocket. I called the bank 3 times. Maggie whistled at the amount. That would solve a lot of problems. It would solve money problems. Claire corrected, stirring her coffee. But what about everything else? Independence? Self-respect? Self-respect doesn't keep the lights on. Maggie's voice was gentle. And independence doesn't mean refusing every helping hand. Remember when Michael was sick? The whole town brought meals for months. That was different. Was it? Community means letting people help, Claire, even rich strangers with surprising good intentions. Claire rubbed her temples. Michael used to say pride makes poor company. Smart man, your husband. Maggie squeezed her shoulder. Maybe it's time to listen. The morning passed in a fog of customers and coffee. Around 2 o'clock, Alex appeared in pressed slacks and a casual sweater that probably cost more than Claire's weekly revenue. Could we talk privately? He asked, his manner direct but not demanding. In the back room, surrounded by community notices, Alex looked less like a corporate titan and more like a man trying to find his footing. He studied a child's crayon drawing pinned to the bulletin board. I should explain why I'm really here. He began. I've been following your children's literacy program for months. The impact you're having, it's remarkable. But when I learned the building was at risk... He paused. I have a pattern, Claire. I look for places like this. Small initiatives being squeezed out by larger forces. Sometimes it's developers, sometimes it's changing economics. But always it's something worth saving. Claire crossed her arms. We're not a charity case. This store has been serving families for generations. We know our community, what they need. Exactly. Alex interrupted, turning to face her. You know your community. That's what makes this place valuable. Do you know how rare that is? Real connection, genuine impact? His voice softened. I spent years in corporate acquisitions, closing plants, consolidating operations, efficient but soulless. Now I try to protect places that matter, not change them, protect them. By buying them? By giving them stability. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture. Look, I'm not good at connection. Numbers, strategies, those I understand. But places like this, they're magic, and they're disappearing. Claire studied him. His earnest expression, the slight awkwardness beneath his polished exterior. Why do you care so much? Because I was wrong for a long time about what matters. He said simply. Money can't buy belonging, but it can protect the places where belonging happens naturally. Let me buy the building, not the business. That stays yours. But let me ensure no developer can ever threaten this space. And the conditions? Meet with my lawyer tomorrow. Hear the proposal. That's all I'm asking. He smiled slightly. I promise not to turn it into a coffee chain. Claire thought of Michael's letters, of Maggie's words about pride. I'll meet your lawyer, she said finally. But I'm not promising anything else. After Alex left, Claire sat at her desk, the check still in the drawer. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to Ethan's number. Her son should know about this development, but what would she say? That she was considering help from a stranger? That the store's future might depend on trust? The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Claire listened to Ethan's recorded voice, so much like Michael's, and hung up without leaving a message. Some conversations needed to happen face to face. For now, she had until tomorrow to decide whether Alexander Voss's solution was an answer to prayer or a deal with the devil. She tucked the phone away and returned to the front of the store, where Maggie was helping a young mother select picture books. The scene was so ordinary, so precious in its simplicity. Whatever came next, Claire knew this was worth fighting for. or maybe worth being humble enough to accept help to save. The law office smelled of leather and lemon polish, with an undercurrent of expensive cologne that seemed to cling to the walls themselves. Claire sat in an ergonomic chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, facing a wall of legal certificates in heavy mahogany frames. The conference room was small but pristine, with morning sunlight streaming through vertical blinds, casting zebra-like shadows across the slate-grey carpet. Ms. Rodriguez, Alex's lawyer, spread documents across the polished table with practiced efficiency. Her crimson blazer looked sharp against the room's muted greys, and her gold bracelet clinked softly against the tabletop as she arranged the papers. "The terms are straightforward," she explained, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against the first page. Mr. Voss's philanthropic trust would purchase the building outright, clearing all existing liens and encumbrances. This includes the outstanding mortgage and property tax arrears. Claire's hands twisted in her lap, her right thumb unconsciously rubbing against the empty space where her wedding ring used to be. "And my role." Her voice sounded smaller than she intended in the hushed atmosphere of the room. "You'd retain complete operational control of the book nook for your lifetime, rent-free, with maintenance costs covered by the trust." Ms. Rodriguez slid another document forward, her movements smooth and confident. The trust would also establish an annual programming fund of $50,000, specifically for community initiatives like your children's reading hour, author visits, and any other literary events you wish to develop. It sounded too good to be true. Claire's eyes skimmed the dense legal text, catching phrases like perpetual easement and successor interests. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to decipher what lay between the lines of legalese. "In plain English," Ms. Rodriguez continued, her tone softening slightly as she noticed Claire's furrowed brow. "You run the store your way, without interference. Complete autonomy. After your death, operational control reverts to the trust, which is bound by charter to maintain the property's current use as a community bookstore and gathering space." Claire's throat tightened, and she swallowed hard against the sudden lump. "And if I don't sign?" She already knew the answer, but needed to hear it spoken aloud. "The current owner plans to sell to developers next week." Ms. Rodriguez didn't sugarcoat it. "Foreclosure proceedings would begin shortly after. According to my research, they're looking to convert the entire block into upscale condominiums with retail chains on the ground floor." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Claire thought of Michael's watch in its velvet box tucked in her nightstand drawer, of children sprawled on the reading room floor with books open before them like treasure maps, of Maggie's steady presence through every crisis big and small over the past 3 years. Her signature, when she finally wrote it, felt both like surrender and salvation, the pen trembling slightly in her grasp. Maggie was waiting outside, pacing the sidewalk in tight circles, her autumn scarf fluttering in the breeze. She looked up immediately when the glass door swung open. "Well?" Her eyes searched Claire's face anxiously. "I signed the preliminary agreement." Claire's voice sounded distant to her own ears, as if someone else was speaking through her mouth. "Then we're celebrating." Maggie's face broke into a wide smile as she linked their arms together, tugging Claire close. "No arguments. I'm making my grandmother's enchiladas tonight. 7 o'clock, the ones with the secret sauce that makes everyone beg for the recipe." Claire tried to protest, to explain the complexity of her feelings, but Maggie was already texting invitations, her thumbs flying across her phone screen. The day passed in a blur of customers and congratulations. Word traveled faster than light in small towns. By evening, Claire found herself at Maggie's kitchen table, surrounded by the rich, comforting scent of cumin and chilies that filled the cozy apartment. To Claire, Maggie raised her wine glass, the red liquid catching the light from the overhead fixture. Who finally learned to accept help without acting like it's going to kill her. To Alex, added Sarah from the bookstore's weekend shift, lifting her own glass. Her bracelets jangled with the movement. Our mysterious benefactor. May he be as generous as he is good-looking. Claire smiled weakly at the toast, but her hand kept straying to her purse, where the contract weighted like a stone. Between bites of spicy enchilada and bursts of laughter from the small gathering, she excused herself to the bathroom. Sitting on Maggie's closed toilet lid, the muffled sounds of celebration seeping under the door, she pulled out the documents and began reading again, her finger tracing each paragraph. Page 12 caught her eye. The restrictive covenant clause seemed innocuous at first, standard language about maintaining the property's historic character and literary purpose. But as she read deeper, her chest tightened painfully. After her death, the trust would have unilateral power to modify operational parameters in accordance with contemporary needs. Community input would be advisory rather than binding. The meaning crystallized with horrible clarity. The words blurred as tears threatened. She thought of Michael's voice. Sometimes the devil's in the details, honey. His cautious approach to every major decision had sometimes driven her crazy. But now she wished desperately for his careful guidance. Back at the table, Maggie was telling stories about the store's early days, her hands animated as she spoke. Remember when that pipe burst during the winter storm? Claire wouldn't leave until every book was safe. We were there until 3 a.m. with hair dryers. Her fingers were blue, but she kept saying, "Just one more shelf." Everyone laughed appreciatively, but Claire barely heard them through the roaring in her ears. The food turned to ash in her mouth. She'd saved the store, yes, but had she also ensured its soul would die with her? The thought lodged in her throat like a fishbone. Later that night, alone in her kitchen with only the tick of the old wall clock for company, Claire spread the contract across her maple table. The restrictive covenant clause seemed to glow under her reading lamp, the words burning into her vision. Relief warred with regret in her chest, leaving her feeling hollow. The store was safe for now, but its future, the community's future, felt suddenly uncertain, like ground that might give way beneath her feet. She traced Michael's initials, carved decades ago in the kitchen table's corner when they'd first bought it as newlyweds. The wood was smooth beneath her fingertip from years of such absent touches. He'd always said heritage was more than just keeping things alive. It was about passing them on intact, with their heart still beating. The question that kept her awake, staring at the shifting shadows on her ceiling, wasn't whether she'd made the right choice, but whether she'd made it the right way. The contract lay open to page 12, its legal language both a lifeline and a noose around everything she held dear. Tomorrow the town would celebrate their salvation, toast to their secure future. But tonight Claire sat alone with the weight of what she'd gained, and what she might have lost in the fine print of a promise too good to question. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the mountains when the first whispers started at Annie's diner. Claire could hear them as she walked past. Hushed voices over coffee cups, newspapers rustling as people pointed to the business section. Did you see? The whole block, bought by some millionaire from Seattle. Billionaire, more like. Voss Holdings owns half the coast. Inside the book nook, Claire's phone buzzed with texts. First from Mayor June. Press statement going out. Keeping it balanced. Call me. The local news website already had the headline, "Historic Downtown Block Purchased by Philanthropist Alexander Voss." Claire's hands shook as she unlocked the store. By 10 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed constantly. Not for books, for gossip. Old Mrs. Henderson clutched her weekly romance novel. My Harold worked that hardware store 40 years before the chain stores came. Remember what happened then. This is different, Claire assured her, but the words felt hollow. At the counter, Bob Wilson, who'd owned the barber shop 3 doors down since forever, shook his head. Development's like a tide, Claire. Starts with one building, ends with condos. Alex Voss isn't that kind of investor, Claire defended, surprising herself. That's what they all say at first. Bob paid for his newspaper. Just hope you know what you're doing. Mayor June's statement played on the local radio. We welcome Mr. Voss's investment while maintaining our commitment to preserving our town's unique character. His purchase ensures continued local employment and stabilizes a vital piece of our downtown core. Politically careful words that Claire knew would satisfy no one completely. By lunch, the sidewalk buzzed with debate. Through the window, Claire watched Sarah Miller, who taught 3rd grade, arguing with Pete from the bank. But the children's reading program, it's saved. Do you know how many of my kids depend on those books? At what cost? Pete countered. Outside money means outside control. The bell chimed again. Alex stood in the doorway, looking less polished than usual in jeans and a sweater. Bad time? Claire's jaw tightened. Depends on your definition of bad. He glanced at the gathering crowd outside. I see the news traveled fast. Small towns, we talk. Alex moved to the counter, maintaining a careful distance. I have a proposal. A community advisory board. Local voices helping shape future decisions. You'd chair it, of course. More committees won't fix this. Claire straightened a display with sharp movements. These people need to know their home isn't being sold out from under them. Isn't that exactly what the advisory board would prevent? It's not about prevention, it's about trust. Claire met his eyes. Trust takes time, and actions, not proposals. Alex opened his mouth to respond, but the bell chimed again. Father Tom entered, his collar bright white against his dark skin. Claire, I thought I might find you here. Mr. Voss, a pleasure to meet you properly. Alex nodded, looking relieved at the interruption. Father, I should go. Claire, think about the board. He left quickly, the bell's cheerful ring at odds with the tension. Father Tom settled into the reading chair by the window. Quite a morning you're having. Claire sank into the opposite chair. Everyone has an opinion. And what's yours? That I might have made a terrible mistake. She twisted her hands. Or saved everything. I can't tell any more. Father Tom's smile was gentle. You know, when our church needed a new roof, some wanted to preserve the old tiles at any cost. Others said we should modernize completely. In the end, we had to ask, what serves our purpose best? This is different. Is it? He leaned forward. Claire, I've watched you run this store for years. Every decision you've made has been about serving others, the children who need books, the elderly who need community, the stories that need telling. Has that purpose changed? Claire thought of the contract's restrictions, of Bob's warnings. But after I'm gone, we're all stewards, not owners. The question isn't whether change will come, but whether we guide it with wisdom and grace. He stood, straightening his jacket. Judge the tree by its fruits, not its appearance. That's all I'm saying. The day faded into dusk. Claire sat alone in the reading chair, Michael's watch heavy in her palm. The face caught the last light, reflecting it like water. She remembered Michael's voice. Sometimes the hardest part of protecting something is knowing when to share the burden. Outside, streetlights flickered on. The evening crowd at Annie's diner was still debating, their shadows moving across her window. But here, in the quiet of her shop, surrounded by thousands of stories, Claire felt the first stirring of certainty. The watch ticked steadily in her hand, marking time as it always had. The store would change. Everything did. But its heart, its purpose that she could protect, Not alone, maybe. Not anymore. But perhaps that had been the problem all along. She placed the watch back in its velvet box, tucked safely behind the counter where it belonged. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more debates, more challenges. But tonight, in the growing darkness, Claire sat with her decision and the ghost of Michael's smile, committed to the path she'd chosen, uncertain, but unwavering. Early morning light slanted through the windows as Claire unlocked the book nook's front door. She nearly dropped her keys at the sight of Alex Voss, already inside, wrestling with a tower of heavy boxes. "How did you—" she started. "Maggie let me in." He straightened, brushing dust from his normally pristine shirt. "These children's books needed sorting," she said. Claire watched him work, noticing how his careful movements betrayed his unfamiliarity with physical labor. Still, there was something endearing about his determination. "The new arrivals section goes by the window," she offered, surprising herself. Throughout the morning, Alex methodically unpacked books, occasionally consulting Claire's organizational system with furrowed brows. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing an expensive watch that caught the light. By noon, dust streaked his hands and face. "Is this by Marion Keithson?" he asked, holding up a novel. "Keithan," Claire corrected, fighting a smile. "She's lived here 40 years, writes poetry about the river." The afternoon brought the weekly children's reading hour. Claire watched, amused, as Alex perched awkwardly on the too small chair, surrounded by squirming kids. "The very hungry caterpillar," he began, his corporate polish slipping as tiny hands pointed at pictures and asked endless questions. A small girl named Lucy, usually too shy to participate, crept closer to see the illustrations. Alex noticed and tilted the book so she could see better, earning a tiny smile. "You're not terrible at this," Claire admitted later, straightening the reading corner. "High praise indeed." He placed a tin on the counter. "Italian cookies? A peace offering?" The next day, Alex appeared again, this time tackling the daunting archival shelf. Claire found him surrounded by yellowed newspaper clippings and local history volumes. "These need preserving properly," he muttered, making notes. "Acid-free folders, climate control." "We make do," Claire said defensively. "Making do isn't the same as thriving." He looked up, then softened his tone. "Sorry, corporate habit." They worked late that evening, the shop quiet except for rustling papers and the occasional comment. Around midnight, Claire brought them coffee. "Why here?" she asked suddenly. "Of all the places needing help." Alex was silent for a long moment. "My ex-wife used to say I tried to fix everything with money. Maybe she was right." He carefully refolded a brittle newspaper. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. I'm sorry. Small towns understand something I forgot somewhere along the way. Connection matters more than transaction." The following afternoon, Claire found a copy of the local paper on her counter. The headline read, "Anonymous donor supports local initiatives." Below was a quote from Mrs. Henderson next door. "The Book Nook isn't just a store, it's where our community comes together. Whoever's helping preserve that understands what matters here." Alex appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't authorize that story." "No," Claire said, "but Mrs. Henderson's right." She gestured to Lucy, who was back again, quietly reading in the corner. "Some things need protecting." That evening, they sat among the shelves, sharing the Italian cookies. Alex had his sleeves rolled up again, a smudge of dust on his cheek. Claire found herself laughing at his impression of a particularly demanding corporate board member. "You know," she said, "you're not what I expected." "No." "You're terrible at shelving books. Your pronunciation of local names is painful, and you brought cookies that cost more than our weekly sales." She smiled, genuine and warm for the first time in weeks. "But you're trying, really trying." He ducked his head, pleased and embarrassed. "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." The fifth day brought more volunteers, drawn by the paper's story. Claire watched Alex show a teenager how to catalogue new arrivals, his earlier awkwardness replaced by patient explanation. When Lucy brought him another book to read, he settled into the children's corner without hesitation. Looking around her shop, boxes unpacked, archives preserved, children reading, and Alex Voss somehow fitting into it all, Claire felt something shift. The wariness wasn't gone, but alongside it grew something new. Hope, tentative but real. Maggie caught her eye and mouthed, "I told you so." Claire just shook her head, but her smile remained. The book nook hummed with life, and for the first time since Michael's death, change felt less like loss and more like possibility. Morning light filtered through the shop's dusty windows as Alex spread old ledgers and maps across the backroom table. Claire watched him arrange papers with careful precision, his fingers tracing lines between small towns marked in red ink. "These are the communities we've helped," he said softly. "Libraries in Cedar Grove, a theatre restoration in Pine Hill, small business grants in—" "Milford," Claire cut in, her finger landing on a familiar dot. The name hit her like a physical blow. "You were involved with Milford." Alex's hands stilled on the papers, his shoulders tensed, and when he looked up, his carefully maintained composure cracked. "Yes," he said, "but not in the way you might think. Not anymore." Claire walked to the community board, where yellowed letters and photos hung. Her hands trembled as she unpinned one particular envelope. "The Martinez family wrote this. They used to drive an hour every Saturday for our reading program, until the plant closed." She pulled out the letter, its creases well worn. "Their daughter Amy loved stories about butterflies." "I know." Alex's voice was barely audible. "I was there when we made the decision." Claire turned sharply. "You were what?" "I was an executive at Voss Mitchell Industries then, before I started the foundation." He pressed his palms flat against the table. "We closed the plant. 300 jobs, gone. I signed the papers myself." The silence in the room grew thick. Outside they could hear the cheerful bell as customers entered the shop, Maggie's warm greeting. But in the back room, time seemed suspended. "All those families," Claire said, "all those lives upended. I told myself it was just business." Alex's voice cracked. "Profit margins, quarterly reports, clean, simple numbers on a page. But I went there afterward, saw the empty parking lot, the for sale signs in yards." He ran a hand through his hair. "I keep a list of every employee's name, every single one." Claire sank into a chair, the Martinez letter still in her hand. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know who you're dealing with. Both versions, the man who ruined lives with a signature and the one trying to make it right." Claire walked back to the board, touching more letters. The Hendersons, who'd lost their house. The Reeves twins, whose college plans evaporated. Real people, not numbers on a page. "I remember when they left," she said. "Amy Martinez cried. She'd just started chapter books on her own." Claire's fingers brushed another photo. "The Hendersons' boy gave me his library card, said he wouldn't need it anymore." Alex stood, moving toward her, but stopped when she held up a hand. "I'm not finished," she said. "These people trusted their community would protect them, that business leaders would see them as more than profit margins." She turned to face him. "And now you want me to trust you'll protect this place. I know it's complicated." "Complicated?" Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. Michael used to say that word was just a fancy way of saying messy but true. She pulled Michael's watch from her pocket, running her thumb over its worn face. He believed in second chances, said everyone deserves the opportunity to do better. What do you believe? Alex asked quietly. Claire studied him, his rumpled shirt, the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands couldn't quite stay still. The polished executive was gone, replaced by someone raw and human. I believe, she said slowly, that you're trying. But I also believe those families deserved better than trying. They deserved someone who saw their worth before it was too late. Alex nodded, accepting the judgment. You're right. I need time, Claire said, her voice firm but not unkind. Please leave. He gathered his papers without argument, tucking them carefully into his leather briefcase. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for telling you, but for who I was then. After he left, Claire sat alone in the back room, Michael's watch cool in her palm. The community board faced her. Dozens of letters, photos, and drawings from people whose lives had touched hers through books and stories. Some gone now, some still here, all connected by more than just commerce. She thought about Alex's ledgers, his careful marking of towns helped and harmed, about Amy Martinez's butterfly drawings and the way Alex read to shy Lucy, about Michael's belief in second chances and her own struggle with forgiveness. The watch ticked steadily in her hand, marking time as she sat with these complicated truths, that good people can make terrible decisions, that atonement is messy but necessary, that sometimes protection comes from unexpected sources. Through the door, she heard Maggie helping customers, books being purchased, life continuing. The Book Nook had always been more than just a store. It was a keeper of stories, both joyful and painful. Now she had to decide if its next chapter could include redemption. Claire placed Michael's watch back in her pocket and stood. She needed to think, to weigh the cost of trust against the price of pride. The answers wouldn't come easily, but they would come. Claire sat in her usual booth at Joey's diner, pushing a half-eaten grilled cheese around her plate. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving only a few regulars nursing coffee cups and sharing the day's gossip. The bell above the door chimed. Claire looked up to see Ethan standing there, his work jacket still dusty from the construction site. Her heart skipped. She hadn't seen him in weeks. "Mom." His voice was tight as he slid into the booth across from her. "Honey, I didn't know you were..." "Were you going to tell me?" He pulled a folded newspaper from his pocket, spreading it on the table between them. The headline jumped out. Local philanthropist saves historic bookstore. Claire's stomach dropped. "I tried calling you." "Yeah, straight to voicemail. Real convenient." His fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "So you just decided to sell out? Just like that?" "It's not selling out, Ethan. It's survival." "Right, because taking money from some rich guy who probably doesn't even read books is totally what Dad would have wanted." The mention of Michael stung. "Your father would have wanted the store to survive. The store, maybe, but not like this." Ethan's voice rose, drawing looks from nearby tables. "You didn't even discuss it with me. I'm family, Mom, or did you forget that while you were busy playing savior of local literature?" Claire stood abruptly. "We should continue this at the store." The walk back was silent, tension crackling between them. Inside the Book Nook, Maggie took one look at their faces and quietly excused herself to check inventory. "I had to make a decision," Claire said once they were alone. "The landlord was selling. And you couldn't come to me." Ethan's voice cracked. "I have savings. I could have helped." "Your savings are for your future, not for..." The bell chimed again. Alex stood in the doorway, holding a stack of papers. "Claire, I brought the revised—" He stopped short, reading the room. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Oh, perfect, the White Knight himself." He turned to Alex. "Tell me, what's the real angle here? Tax write-off? Good PR?" "Ethan," Claire warned. "No, I want to know. Because last time I checked, rich guys don't just hand out money without expecting something in return." Alex set his papers down carefully. "I understand your concern. You don't understand anything about us." Ethan snapped. "This store was my dad's dream too. Mum's not the only one who lost him." He pushed past Alex and out the door, letting it slam behind him. Claire found him in the back room 10 minutes later, sitting at the old reading table where he used to do homework. The community board behind him was covered with years of photos, including one of him and Michael at a Little League game. "You weren't here," he said quietly. "After Dad died. You were here, in the store, but you weren't really here." "I know." Claire sat across from him. "I thought if I could just keep everything running, keep his dreams alive." "What about my dreams? What about when I needed help with college applications, or when Sarah broke up with me, or when I got that promotion?" His voice shook. "You chose this place over me." "No, honey." Claire reached for his hand, but he pulled back. "I was drowning. The store was all I had left of him, and I couldn't—" "Couldn't what? Be my mum?" Ethan stood, pacing. "You know what really kills me? You'll take help from a stranger, but not your own son. Just like when Dad got sick, you handled everything yourself, wouldn't let me help with the medical bills or anything. You were 19. It wasn't your responsibility. I was old enough to share the burden." He stopped at the community board, staring at the Little League photo. "But you never let anyone help. Not then. Not now." Claire pulled Michael's old paperback from her pocket, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that he'd read every summer. "Your father used to say sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered. Yeah, well, Dad's not here." Ethan's voice was thick. "And neither were you." He left without another word, his footsteps heavy on the old wooden floor. Claire sat there, holding Michael's book, until the shadows lengthened across the table. Maggie found her there as evening fell. Without speaking, she made 2 cups of tea and pulled up a chair. "He's hurting," Maggie said finally. "I know." Claire traced the book's worn spine. "So am I." They sat together in the growing darkness, the smell of books and cinnamon tea wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. Outside, the town continued its evening routine. Cars passing, people walking dogs, life moving forward even when hearts stood still. 2 days crawled by like molasses in January. Claire noticed the first flyer taped to a lamppost outside the book nook early Tuesday morning. Bold red letters screamed, "Revitalize Main Street! Don't let our town get left behind!" Below was a glossy rendering of sleek glass, storefronts and trendy cafes, courtesy of Summit Development Group. By afternoon, the flyers were everywhere. Maggie brought one in, crumpled from where she'd yanked it off the diner's window. "Can you believe this? They're making it sound like we're stuck in the Dark Ages." Claire smoothed the paper on the counter. The fine print promised modern amenities while preserving local charm. Whatever that meant. Her phone buzzed with a town-wide alert. Mayor June had called an emergency council meeting for that evening. Social media exploded. Claire's newsfeed filled with heated debates between neighbors who'd known each other for decades. Sarah from the flower shop posted photos of thriving historic districts. Jimmy at the hardware store shared articles about failed modernization projects. The comments grew increasingly sharp. By 5 o'clock, the town square hummed with tension. Claire locked up early and walked outside into the gathering crowd. "It's about time we got some real development here." Todd Miller, who ran the new CrossFit gym, was saying. "My clients drive 40 minutes to shop at decent stores. And what happens to the rest of us?" Martha Wilson's voice quavered. She'd owned the yarn shop for 30 years. "Those rents will triple overnight." "Change isn't always bad." Someone shouted from the back. "Neither is tradition," came another voice. The emergency meeting packed the council chamber. Claire squeezed into a seat between Maggie and Father Tom. Alex sat near the front, his shoulders tight under his suit jacket. Richard Chase from Summit Development took the podium with practiced ease. His presentation showed gleaming storefronts, rooftop gardens, and promises of increased tax revenue. "We're offering competitive buyouts to all current property owners," he said smoothly. "Our vision maintains the town's character while bringing it into the 21st century." Mayor June leaned forward. "And the current businesses. First right of refusal on new retail spaces, naturally." Chase's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Though we'd need to ensure tenants meet certain standards." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chase clicked to his next slide. "Now, speaking of standards, it's worth noting that some recent property acquisitions in town have interesting histories." His gaze flicked to Alex. "For instance, Mr. Voss's purchase in Millbrook became quite exclusive. Members only, I believe?" Claire watched Alex's jaw clench. Before he could respond, hands shot up across the room. "My daughter needs a job here, not another town she has to commute to," said Ben Cooper, whose family had farmed outside town for generations. "But what about attracting new businesses?" argued Lisa Chen, who'd recently opened a graphic design studio. "We need modern infrastructure." Near the windows, a group of local artists held up handmade signs, "Culture not condos" and "Save our soul." Mayor June called for order, but the room had divided into heated clusters. Claire felt the weight of Michael's watch in her pocket as she stood. "I'd like to speak," she said quietly. The room gradually hushed. 3 years ago, when my husband died, this town kept me alive." Her voice strengthened. "Not just with casseroles and sympathy cards, but with real community. You brought your children to story time. You joined book clubs. You made the Book Nook more than just a store. You made it a home." She turned to face the crowd. "I understand wanting growth, but there's a difference between growth and replacement. Our town needs healing, not demolition. We need to build on our foundation, not tear it out." Looking at Alex, she continued, "Yes, we need help, but help that preserves our voice, our history, our right to decide our future. Because a town isn't just buildings and businesses, it's the stories we share, the traditions we keep, and the promises we make to each other." The room fell silent. Even Chase stopped clicking his presentation remote. "I've seen what happens when decisions are made purely for profit," Claire finished. "We lose more than just buildings. We lose ourselves." The meeting dissolved into heated debates that lasted hours. By the time Claire walked home, rain was falling steadily, drumming against the Book Nook's windows. She unlocked the door and stepped into the familiar darkness. Surrounded by shelves of stories, she felt the weight of the day settle onto her shoulders. The rain drew silvery tracks down the windows, blurring the streetlights outside. She traced a finger along the spines of books Michael had loved, wondering if she'd said enough, fought hard enough. In the gathering gloom, Claire sank into her favorite reading chair. The shop felt both sanctuary and battlefield, a quiet eye in the storm of change threatening to reshape everything she held dear. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm, offering no answers to her uncertainties. The town hall buzzed with nervous energy as residents filled every seat. Extra chairs lined the walls, and people stood shoulder to shoulder in the back. Claire's stomach churned as she watched the projector flicker to life, casting a harsh glow across faces she'd known for decades. Mayor June called the meeting to order, her voice steady but concerned. Tonight we'll hear presentations about the future of our downtown district, specifically regarding recent property acquisitions. Richard Chase from Summit Development stood again, this time armed with a thick folder. I'd like to share some research about similar trust arrangements in other communities. He clicked through slides showing transformed main streets. In Riverside, what started as preservation became private clubs. In Millbrook, locally owned shops were replaced by high-end boutiques. Maggie squeezed Claire's hand as Chase continued. While Mr. Voss's foundation presents these as preservation projects, the pattern shows a different story. He pointed to before and after photos. Within 5 years, most original businesses were priced out or bought out. The room filled with worried whispers. Claire watched her neighbors exchange glances, saw doubt creeping across their faces. That's not what's happening here. Alex stood, his voice firm but strained. The trust agreement specifically protects... The agreement? Ethan's voice cut through the murmurs as he rose from his seat near the back. Claire's heart stopped. She hadn't known he was there. You mean the one where my mother loses all control? Heads turned. Ethan walked to the front, anger clear in every step. Mum didn't tell you all the details, did she? About how she signed away ownership? How this philanthropist swooped in to save us? His voice cracked on the last word. Ethan, please, Claire whispered, but he continued. This man closed factories, destroyed communities. Now he buys up small towns piece by piece, claiming he's helping. But my mother doesn't own the Book Nook anymore. She's just a caretaker until he decides to change the rules. The room erupted. Claire felt dozens of eyes turn to her, questioning, accusing. Martha Wilson, who'd attended every book club for 15 years, spoke first. Claire, is that true? You don't own it anymore? Her throat tight, Claire stood. The trust owns the building, she admitted, but I have operational control. For now, Chase interjected smoothly, until the trust board votes otherwise. You sold us out, someone called from the back. After all our fundraisers, all our support. Faces that had smiled at her that morning now looked away. Betty Chen, whose daughter Claire had taught to read, shook her head sadly. Tom Peterson, who'd helped install the children's corner shelves, crossed his arms and frowned. I was trying to save it. Claire's voice shook. To keep it alive for all of us. By giving it away? Ethan's words hit like physical blows. Dad built those shelves. That was our heritage, Mom, our family's legacy. The room spun. Claire saw Michael's face in her mind, his pride when they'd first opened, his joy at every small success. She couldn't breathe. She stumbled toward the door. I'm sorry, I need air. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring concerned voices calling her name. The night air hit her face as she burst outside, tears blurring her vision. Behind her, the door opened again. Claire, wait! Alex's voice. Please, let me explain. But she was already running, her footsteps echoing on empty sidewalks. She ran until she reached the book nook, fumbling with her keys, finally collapsing against the door once inside. The familiar smell of books surrounded her, but tonight it brought no comfort. She moved through the darkness, touching spines she knew by heart. Michael's favorite chair sat empty in the corner. Their wedding photo watched from behind the counter. Her fingers found the light switch, but she left it off. In the darkness, she could pretend tomorrow wouldn't come. Pretend she hadn't lost her neighbor's trust. Pretend she still had a right to be here. Claire's hand brushed the morning's newspaper. still open to the announcement of tonight's meeting. With trembling fingers, she turned the sign in the window to "Closed." Standing in the dark shop, surrounded by thousands of stories but unable to find words for her own, Claire wondered if she should ever turn it to "Open" again. The watch in her pocket felt heavier than ever. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the shelves Michael had built, the community board covered in flyers, the children's corner where generations had learned to love reading. She locked the door, each click of the deadbolt echoing in the empty space. Tomorrow loomed like a shadow, full of questions she wasn't sure she could answer. Morning light crept through the book nook's windows, but Claire hadn't opened the blinds. Dust motes danced in the thin beams that snuck through, making the shop feel frozen in time. The headlines on her phone made her stomach twist. Local landmarks future uncertain after revelations. Town hall meeting exposes book nook ownership dispute. Community questions Voss Foundation's true intentions. She set the phone face down on the counter. The empty shop felt both suffocating and achingly familiar. Her fingers traced book spines as she walked the aisles, well-worn mysteries Michael had loved, children's books with dog-eared corners, poetry collections that had comforted her after his death. The echo of past story times seemed to linger in the children's corner. She could almost hear the giggling, the gasps at dramatic moments, the quiet contentment of young readers lost in new worlds. Now the kid-sized chairs sat empty, accusingly silent. The bell above the door jingled. Claire didn't turn around. "I brought reinforcements," Maggie announced, holding up 2 steaming coffee cups. "And before you say you're not hungry, I brought muffins too." "I don't deserve you." Claire managed a weak smile. "Oh, honey, you've got that backward." Maggie set everything on the counter and pulled Claire into a tight hug. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Claire sank into a chair. "Have you seen the comments online?" "I have, and I've been giving some people a piece of my mind." Maggie's eyes flashed. "Half these folks wouldn't have a bookstore to complain about if you hadn't kept it going all these years." Claire wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup. "They're right, though. I should have been more transparent." "You were trying to save something precious to this town." Maggie sat across from her. "And speaking of saving, Father Tom asked about you this morning. Evening service is at 7. Might do you good to go." "I don't know if I can face anyone right now." "That's exactly why you should." Maggie's voice softened. "You're not alone in this, Claire." After Maggie left for her afternoon shift at the library, Claire began the mindless task of straightening shelves. In the classics section, a familiar volume caught her eye, an old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that Michael had read every summer. When she opened it, a slip of paper fell out. Michael's neat handwriting filled the margin of a dog-eared page. "Atticus says it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, but what about the sin of staying silent when you could speak? True forgiveness starts with truth." Claire traced the words with her finger, feeling tears well up. Michael had always known exactly what to say, even now, years after his death. The words seemed to speak directly to her current situation. She glanced at the wall clock, 5:30, just enough time to clean up before evening service. St. Mark's was quiet when she slipped in, sliding into a back pew. A few heads turned, but no one approached. The familiar smell of wood polish and old hymnals wrapped around her like a blanket. Father Tom's sermon seemed aimed straight at her heart. "Reconciliation," he said, "isn't about erasing wrongs. It's about acknowledging them, facing them with courage, and choosing to move forward with wisdom and grace. True repentance isn't retreat. It's the brave act of stepping forward to make things right." Claire found herself nodding, something settling in her chest. The panic of the past 24 hours began to fade, replaced by something clearer, calmer. After the service, she lingered in the garden, watching the sun set behind the church steeple. The evening air carried the scent of late summer flowers, and somewhere a cricket chirped its evening song. "I wondered if you'd come," Father Tom said, appearing beside her. "Your timing was perfect." Claire admitted, "I needed to hear that message tonight." "And what did you hear?" His kind eyes studied her face. "That running away isn't the answer." She touched Michael's watch in her pocket. "I've been so focused on preserving the past that I forgot about building the future. The Book Nook isn't just mine to protect. It belongs to everyone who's ever found refuge there." Father Tom nodded. "And what will you do with that understanding?" "I need to talk to Alex," she said slowly. "Not to demand anything or seek revenge, but to understand why he's really here and to find a better way forward, one that honors both the past and the future." "That sounds like wisdom to me." He squeezed her shoulder gently. Walking home in the growing darkness, Claire felt lighter than she had in days. The Book Nook's windows glowed softly from the security lights inside. She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the old building that held so many memories. Tomorrow she would go to Alex, not as an adversary, but as someone seeking genuine understanding. The way forward wasn't through anger or retreat, but through honest conversation and a willingness to find common ground. She touched the watch in her pocket one last time, imagining Michael's smile. "I hear you," she whispered. "I understand now." The crickets sang their evening chorus as she walked home, her steps steady and purposeful. For the first time since the town hall meeting, she felt ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Claire pulled up to the rented coastal estate just as morning fog was lifting from the water. The house was understated, weathered grey shingles, white trim, and neat hedges that looked recently pruned. No flashy cars or obvious signs of wealth, just quiet elegance that seemed to apologize for itself. The housekeeper who answered the door led Claire through rooms furnished with simple, expensive pieces. Watercolor seascapes hung on walls painted soft white. Everything looked carefully chosen but temporary, like Alex was ready to leave at a moment's notice. She found him in a sunny room overlooking the ocean, papers spread across a desk. He looked like he hadn't slept. Jacket off, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. When he saw her, he stood quickly. "Claire, I wasn't sure you'd come. We need to talk." She remained standing, hands clasped in front of her. "Really talk, Alex. No more carefully worded legal documents or polite dancing around the truth." He nodded, gesturing to chairs by the window. "Would you like coffee?" "No, I want answers." She sat, but kept her spine straight. "Why did you really come here? And don't tell me it was chance." Alex sank into the opposite chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I followed stories about independent bookstores closing. When I read about the Book Nook's children's program, how it gave kids a safe place after school." He trailed off. "I thought I could help." "By swooping in to save us? Taking control because you know better?" The words came out sharp. "That's paternalism, Alex, however well-intentioned." "You're right." He looked out at the waves. "I've spent years trying to fix things with money and legal frameworks. It was easier than facing people directly." "Why?" Claire pressed. "What are you really trying to fix?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. 10 years ago, I was part of a company that closed plants in small towns like yours. We called it strategic restructuring. Clean, bloodless words for destroying communities." His voice grew rough. "I told myself it was just business, but I saw what it did to people, their homes, their children's futures." "Like Milford," Claire said softly. "Like Milford." He met her eyes. "I left the corporate world after that. Started the foundation, but you're right. I'm still trying to control outcomes instead of trusting communities to know what they need. So now you're planning to withdraw? Run away because it got messy? I thought it would be better for everyone. The trust can transfer to... No. Claire cut him off. Redemption isn't about running away when things get hard. It's about staying, being accountable, doing the real work of rebuilding trust. Alex looked startled. Even after everything that's happened? Especially after everything that's happened. Claire leaned forward. You want to make amends? Then work with us, not above us. Real partnership, not paternalism. What would that look like? His voice was quiet, curious. A non-profit model, community governance through a local board. Your foundation provides an endowment that legally preserves the bookstore's mission, but control stays with the people who know this community best. Claire watched his face. No more Lone Ranger philanthropy. Real collaboration. It would take time to restructure everything. We have time. Claire's voice softened. But first, you need to face the town again. Come to tomorrow's community meeting. Not to defend yourself or make promises, just to listen. Really listen. Alex was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the ocean. Finally, he nodded. Okay, together. Together. Claire stood, feeling oddly light despite the heavy conversation. Tomorrow at 7. At the door, Alex spoke again. Thank you for not letting me run away. Claire turned back. Someone once told me that books are about second chances. Maybe bookstores are too. She drove home through the lifting fog, watching the sun break through in golden patches. The conversation had left them both raw and exposed, but something had shifted. Trust, like a delicate seedling, had taken root in honest ground. The town hall buzzed with tension as people filed in, their whispers echoing off the wood-panelled walls. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she arranged papers on the podium, but she kept her chin high. Alex stood quietly to the side, his usual polished appearance softened by genuine nervousness. Mayor June called the meeting to order, her gavel cutting through the murmurs. We're here to discuss a new proposal for the Book Nook's future. Mrs. Moran and Mr. Voss have prepared a detailed presentation. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. Last week we faced hard truths about trust and control. Tonight we're offering a different path forward, one that keeps the Book Nook truly in community hands. She nodded to Alex, who joined her at the podium. He cleared his throat. I made mistakes in how I approached this. Instead of imposing solutions, I should have asked what the community needed. He gestured to the stack of documents. So we've created something new together. Claire began distributing copies of the proposed charter. The Book Nook will become a non-profit organization. The building, inventory, and a $2 million endowment will be transferred to this new entity. Gasps rippled through the crowd at the number. Mayor June leaned forward, adjusting her reading glasses. And the governance structure? A 7-member board of trustees. Claire explained. All elected by community vote. No single person or entity can control more than one seat. The charter requires complete financial transparency, annual public meetings, and quarterly reports. Alex added, most importantly, there's an ironclad clause preventing future privatization. The property and mission must remain community-owned in perpetuity. A local teacher raised her hand. What about the children's programs? Protected and expanded. Claire said firmly. 20% of the endowment's annual returns are specifically designated for youth literacy initiatives. The town lawyer, Mr. Peterson, stood up. I've reviewed the preliminary documents. The legal framework is remarkably solid. All decisions require majority board approval, and there are clear conflict of interest provisions. Maggie spoke from her seat. What about day-to-day operations? Claire remains as executive director. Alex answered. but with oversight from the board and annual performance reviews, just like any non-profit leader. The room grew quiet as Ethan rose slowly. Claire's heart clenched, remembering his anger from before. "I've been critical," he began, "because I feared we were trading our independence for temporary security." He paused, looking at Claire. "But my mother showed real courage in pushing for better terms. This plan has teeth, real protection for what matters most to our town." Claire blinked back tears as scattered applause broke out. Even some previous skeptics were nodding thoughtfully. Mayor June called for discussion. People asked detailed questions about board terms, budget oversight, and succession planning. Claire and Alex answered each one, referring to specific sections of the charter. "The foundation's role?" someone asked. "Limited to one board seat." Alex explained. "We provide financial support but can't control operations or override community decisions." After an hour of discussion, June called the vote. The result wasn't even close, 87% in favor. Claire exhaled deeply as cheers erupted. The next hour became a blur of signatures and handshakes. Lawyers gathered in corners with laptops, beginning to draft final documents. June accepted nomination as board chair, with Maggie and Claire as founding members. Other seats would be filled by special election within 30 days. As the crowd thinned, Claire found herself walking with Alex toward the old iron bridge. The night air was cool and clean. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being willing to let go. You taught me something about trust." He replied, "Real change happens through partnership, not patronage." They stopped at the bridge railing where they'd first met. Below, the river flowed dark and steady. "It won't be easy," Claire mused, "building something new together." "No," Alex agreed, "but worth doing right." He turned to face her. "I'll honor my role as advisor and supporter. No more trying to control outcomes." Claire nodded, thinking of Michael's watch in her pocket. No longer a weight, but a reminder of keeping faith with what matters most. "Well," she said finally, "we have work to do. Board orientation starts Monday. I'll bring the coffee." Alex smiled. Fair trade, of course. They walked back toward town in comfortable silence, two people who had found their way to serving a purpose larger than themselves. Morning sunlight streamed through the book nook's freshly cleaned windows, catching on the new brass letters above the door. The Bridgelight Community Bookstore and Learning Center. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the storefront, and handmade signs lined the sidewalk. "Welcome home," and "Books for All." Claire watched 7-year-old Tommy practice his lines for the opening ceremony. "Books are like bridges," he recited carefully. "They take us to new places." "Perfect," Claire encouraged, straightening his bow tie. "Just like that at 2:00. Ethan balanced on a ladder, touching up paint around the window frames. The morning light caught hints of grey in his dark hair, so like his father's. "Mom," he called down, "what do you think about adding some gold trim here?" "Whatever you think best," she answered, marveling at how easily they worked together now. The past weeks had brought healing conversations over coffee and paint cans. Inside, Maggie orchestrated controlled chaos from behind the counter. "Volunteers, sign in here," she called out, waving a clipboard. "Reading hour slots are filling up fast." Mrs. Henderson, the retired librarian who had taught Claire to read 40 years ago, shuffled in carrying a giant pair of scissors wrapped in red ribbon. "For the ceremony," she beamed. "Been saving these since we opened the new library wing in 1987. Claire hugged her tight. "You're doing the honors, right?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world, dear." Throughout the morning, townspeople streamed in and out, bringing flowers, food, and offers to help. Father Tom blessed the space with a short prayer. Mayor June posted the first official board meeting notice, next Tuesday at 7. Alex arrived mid-morning, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a simple blue button-down. He moved quietly through the crowd, stopping to chat with volunteers, learning names, belonging more with each passing day. "Claire," he called softly, "could you look at something?" In the back office, he showed her draft paperwork for a new scholarship fund. 10 full rides to State College each year for local kids, with preference for first-generation students. "Alex," she breathed, "this is incredible." He shrugged, just trying to help build bridges where they're needed most. The grand reopening began at 2 o'clock sharp. Hundreds gathered on the sidewalk as Tommy led the children's reading group in their poem about books and bridges. Mrs. Henderson's scissors flashed in the sun as she cut the ribbon, declaring, "To literacy, community, and new beginnings." Inside, Claire watched joy ripple through the rooms. Teenagers sprawled in reading nooks, seniors teaching chess in the community corner, young mothers browsing board books. The space felt alive with possibility. Late afternoon brought cake and punch, storytelling circles, and impromptu poetry readings. Maggie organized cleanup crews with military precision, while Ethan helped elderly patrons carry books to their cars. As sunset painted the windows gold, the crowd thinned to family and close friends. Claire sat in her favorite chair, exhausted but content, when Alex appeared with 2 cups of tea. "Walk with me?" he asked quietly. They strolled through town as dusk settled, past lit shop windows and families heading home to dinner. The iron bridge gleamed ahead, strung with tiny white lights someone had added during the town's renewal project. "I've been thinking," Alex said as they reached the middle span, "about bridges and books and second chances." Claire leaned on the railing, watching the river flow below. "Me too. When I first saw you here that night, you were letting go of the past." He turned to face her. "I was too wrapped up in my own guilt to see that what you really needed was partnership, not rescue." "We both had learning to do," Claire said softly. "About trust, about community. You taught me that real change happens heart by heart, story by story." Alex's voice grew quieter. "That's when I started falling in love with you." Claire's breath caught as he knelt, not with grand gestures, but with simple dignity. From his pocket he drew a small box. "I'm not offering rescue anymore," he said. "I'm asking to be your partner, in books and bridges, in service and stories, in all the chapters ahead. Will you marry me?" The ring was modest, a simple sapphire that caught the bridge lights. Claire touched it gently, thinking of Michael's watch safe at home, no longer a weight but a blessing. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to partnership. Yes to writing our story together." They embraced as the evening star appeared above the river. No fireworks, no fanfare, just 2 people who had found their way to each other through learning to serve something larger than themselves. "We should head back," Claire said after a while. "Maggie will worry. Let her worry a little longer." Alex smiled, drawing her close again. They stood together on the bridge where their story began, watching lights come on across town, ready to begin their next chapter. Autumn painted the town in amber and gold on Claire and Alex's wedding morning. Maple leaves spiraled down onto the sidewalk outside the bridge light, where neighbors were already setting up folding chairs and stringing white lights between the shelves. "Perfect day for new beginnings," Maggie said, adjusting her efficient stole in the back room mirror. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for this ceremony. Claire smoothed her simple cream dress, knee-length with lace sleeves, comfortable enough for dancing between bookshelves. "Thank you for doing this, Mags." "As if I'd let anyone else marry my best friend." Maggie grinned, helping Claire pin fresh lavender in her hair. The bookstore transformed beautifully for the occasion. Regulars had arranged reading nooks into intimate seating areas, each table topped with mason jars of wildflowers. The children's corner hosted a spread of homemade dishes: Mrs. Henderson's famous apple pie, Sarah's cornbread, casseroles labeled with careful instructions for reheating. At 11 o'clock, soft guitar music filled the space as guests settled in. Alex stood near the front window, wearing a charcoal suit with a lavender boutonniere. His eyes lit up when Claire appeared, walking alone through the stacks she knew by heart. Maggie began with warm humor. "We're gathered today among these beloved books, where so many stories have found their home, to celebrate two people who found their own story here." Father Tom offered a blessing about stewardship and grace. Then Claire and Alex exchanged vows they'd written together, focused not on possessions, but purpose. "I promise to partner with you in service," Alex said, his voice steady and sure. "To build bridges instead of walls, to listen before acting, to remember that true wealth lies in community." Claire's vows rang clear. "I promise to walk beside you in trust and hope, to honor the past while embracing our future, to nurture the stories that bring people together." They exchanged simple gold bands. Maggie pronounced them married with joyful tears in her eyes. Their first kiss as husband and wife was met with cheers and the sound of books being gently thumped together instead of applause, a reader's celebration. Ethan approached during the potluck reception, pulling Claire into a tight hug. "I'm happy for you, Mom. Really happy." "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, "for understanding, for being here." As afternoon light slanted through the windows, Claire and Alex led their guests to the iron bridge. Everyone carried paper lanterns, delicate with hope. "These lanterns," Claire explained, "aren't for letting go of what matters. They're for lighting the way forward while honoring what came before." She and Alex released their lanterns first, hers for Michael, his for redemption. The gentle current carried them downstream as others followed, until the river glowed with dozens of floating lights. Over the weeks that followed, life settled into new rhythms. The non-profit charter was officially filed, establishing the Bridgelight Community Literary Center with an 11-member board. Claire watched proudly as 17-year-old Maria Rodriguez received the first college scholarship, her eyes bright with dreams of becoming a teacher. Every Wednesday morning, Claire taught a memory writing circle where neighbors shared their stories. Alex worked volunteer shifts, wearing a flour-dusted apron, learning to make coffee just the way regulars liked it. Sometimes Claire caught him straightening the staff picks shelf with careful attention to alphabetical order, and her heart would warm at how naturally he fit into their world. One quiet evening, closing up together, Claire paused beneath Michael's photo. His smile seemed to approve of the shop's evolution. Children sprawled on new reading cushions, fresh paint brightening the walls, but the soul of the place unchanged. Alex touched her shoulder gently. "You okay?" "More than okay," Claire said, reaching for his hand. "I'm home." The shop bell chimed as a last-minute customer hurried in. Claire turned to help them, at peace with all the chapters that had brought her here. The grief she'd honored, the love she'd found, the community that held them all. Outside, autumn winds scattered leaves across the sidewalk. Inside, stories waited on shelves, ready to be discovered. And in between, life went on, rebuilt with care, strengthened by trust, illuminated by love that grew from service rather than possession. The bridge light glowed warm against the darkening sky, a beacon of welcome, just as it had always been. Only now its light seemed brighter, fed by more hearts, more hopes, more hands working together to keep its stories alive. Maggie locked up that night, watching Claire and Alex walk home hand in hand. She smiled, knowing some love stories weren't about dramatic rescues or grand gestures. The best ones grew quietly, built on shared purpose and mutual respect, creating something larger than themselves. The iron bridge stood solid in the distance, no longer a place for letting go, but a symbol of connection. Beneath it, the river flowed on, carrying stories yet to be written, while the bridge light kept its doors open to all who needed shelter in the power of words and the warmth of community.